Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. Trial by Egotism. The Honorable Judge Harold Brybar strode to the bench bearing a coy smile. The court knew that smile well, as did millions watching on view screens all over Mars, as did tens of millions back on Earth who wouldn't get the feed for another hour or so. They also knew the arch of his thick gray eyebrows, the well-trimmed salt and pepper hair he'd gracefully let recede, the petite spectacles he wore when reading, and the mild way he cleared his throat to bring the whole courtroom to attention. In offense to all known theories of jurisprudence, Judge Harold Brybar was a celebrity judge, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. As Brybar sat down, he produced his legendary gavel from the folds of his cloak. It was the gavel that had sent General Sabrina Gallo to the slammer. It was the gavel that had brought justice to the ungrateful eight. It was the gavel that had, so mournfully, let the Scarlet Assassin walk on a series of technicalities. Years ago, a rookie reporter dubbed it the cinematic hammer of justice, and the moniker stuck, though Brybar only laughed and shook his head ruefully when asked about the moniker. Chekhov would have surely side-eyed this fabled instrument of law and order. "This should be the final day of the trial," Judge Brybar said, after customarily clearing his throat. "If Miss Toddle's statement runs long, we'll cut for lunch at 11. How long do you think you'll go?" He flashed a smile at the defendant. "An hour should do it." Marissa Towdle flashed a smile right back between lips stained dark red. She came to court in a maroon pantsuit with a long matching jacket that almost reached the ground, and dark lipstick and fingernail polish to match. Stylish, but for her, understated. Earlier in the trial, she'd favored brighter colors, including a pastel blue skirt that drew immense attention, much of it mockery, in the press. She'd been on trial for previous burglaries and had proven as much a celebrity as the judge overseeing her case. That she'd taken to defending herself only heightened the circus atmosphere. You couldn't wish for a more theatrical combination of defendant and judge. "Excellent," the judge said. "That would mean the jury can deliberate over lunch. A smooth running ship at last." The assembled audience, standing room only, laughed nervously, revealing how much tension the courtroom held. In theory, Towdle should be guilty as a Labrador by a demolished birthday cake. She'd been caught red-handed in the most elaborate and movie-like theft in the history of the planet after all. But many speculated Towdle had a trick or two up her sleeve. Gambling websites gave her a 15% chance of acquittal, and even a 5% chance of escape. The third prime participant in this drama feels ordinary by comparison. Veronica Brief charted a conventional path as she rose through the prosecutorial ranks. Top grades, hard work, schmoozing, ambition, and a photographic memory. There's little reason to elaborate on her story. Veronica had aimed for calm, efficient, and professional as her persona. She let Marissa and Judge Brybar provide the entertainment. The stately prosecutor drew little mention in the tabloids despite overseeing the case of the millennium. And she'd presented a good case, which was easy in one sense because of how strong the evidence was. Someone had stolen the twin pins of Mars, diamond-encrusted spikes that ceremonially finished the oxygen dome of the first Martian city. Marissa Towdle was a known high-stakes burglar and ex-con, She'd been present at the benefit concert from which the pins were stolen. She'd purchased the chemicals needed for the distracting foam bomb that had gone off at the concert. And most damningly, one of the diamond pins had been found in her very apartment. The list of witnesses and items in evidence is so long that, again, there's little need to go into much detail. The most troubling possibility was that if the jury liked Marissa too much, that they were simply so entertained, they might ignore the evidence and vote for acquittal. Today, the defendant would make her last appeal. Today, Marissa Towdle, who'd fired her lawyers after just 4 days into the proceedings, would make her closing argument. She wasn't a lawyer, had never been to law school, and committed innumerable mistakes of law throughout the trial, but she still possessed the supernatural confidence of a legendary burglar, so she'd plowed ahead, learned from each mistake of process, always found a way to laugh with the audience as she suffered a series of sustained objections against her. The Red Planet stood entranced, listening to how she would make her final plea. Marissa Towdle rose. She was quite short, but cut a dramatic figure nonetheless. She strode to the center of the room to address the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my honored peers, good morning to you. Also, good morning to everyone watching in the live audience in this wonderful city of New Olympus and all across Mars and our sister planet of Earth. Also, a quick shout out to anyone reading the transcript in the future. That's serious dedication." Laughter. The prosecution has done a thorough job presenting the evidence against me, and I would be foolish to claim no fear. They found one of the diamond pins at my apartment. Can you believe my incredulity? Without that one piece of evidence, all they have is hearsay and circumstance. And who hasn't been hurt by hearsay and circumstance? I was sorely mistreated on the day they overturned my home. Veronica had decided early in the trial not to be surprised by anything Marissa said. Here she was, starting her final defense by bringing up the single strongest piece of evidence against her, submerging it in a strange cocktail of jokes and grievances. Still, she was as oddly compelling as she'd been the whole trial. Have I mentioned how good you look, jury? The fall weather has really brought out your fashion sense, such lovely browns and greens. I'm going to miss you all when this trial is finally over. And soon it will be over, won't it? Oh, I don't know if this is legal. Is it legal to compliment and reminisce with the jury? It is if there's no objection from the prosecution. This was the judge, now looking in Veronica's direction with a raised eyebrow. All around the court, Veronica felt all eyes suddenly on her, and it was true. She could object for relevance or ingratiation, which Mars had added to the legal code 50 years ago. No objection, Veronica said after a pause worthy of a sitcom, to titters and laughter from the audience. She hadn't intended to object at all, no matter how wild the defendant got. It's considered poor form to object during closing arguments, unless the faults are egregious. Plus, ordinary folks see through flattery and immaterial wanderings most of the time, and that should be especially so in this case. Marissa wasn't just on trial for grand theft, but also for assault. When she'd set off the foam bomb at the dedication ceremony, 3 people had been injured, and many dozens more might have been. These charges alone could add up to decades behind bars. A jury might excuse burglary if they liked a defendant, but harming innocent spectators? No way, Veronica thought. Marissa had avoided lengthy prison sentences from previous burglaries through clever negotiating, and because she'd always been careful to avoid violence. Now, she might be mere hours from a lifetime in prison. How was she so calm? At this point, Marissa had moved on to a PowerPoint presentation, with a selection of quotes projected onto the large screen across from the jury, with certain words highlighted for effect. The rotten witch made all the plans and said it would be an easy score without any risk of harm to anyone. That's what one of my supposed henchmen said about me, if you'll remember. I don't see why that insult was necessary. Read the next quote, this time from a witness who supposedly saw me outside the concert hall. She was laughing like a hyena, or like some evil witch. With the shouting inside, I could barely hear her, but I was close enough I could just make out the cackle. I could read each and every one of these quotes, each more demeaning than the last, but you can look over the full list if you've got the stomach for it. So many horrible things said about me, which I don't mind. I can accept taunts and jeers. But it is certainly interesting that so many of these witnesses couldn't help but include spiteful, disparaging remarks. And you'll notice how many bring out the W word. It almost feels like they were coordinating their testimony somehow. Veronica caught a glimpse of the jury. She read ambivalence on their faces, scowls, smirks, narrowed, focused eyes, and furrowed brows. They were all paying attention, but none appeared sympathetic, and only a few seemed amused. She found it galling that Marissa would imply misconduct from the prosecution. Early in the legal process, Marissa had tried to trade the location of the second diamond pin for legal protection, which Veronica would never have agreed to, not leastwise because the police were convinced they could lean on her conspirators to produce the second pin, an assumption which, 7 weeks later, had not come true. Those negotiations were inadmissible at trial, but made Marissa's attempts to cast the prosecution as corrupt all the more preposterous. Marissa knew she was guilty, and knew the prosecution knew she was guilty. And then there's the matter of the diamond pin of peace, found in my apartment, right under my very bed. It's the linchpin of the case against me. But do you find that likely? That a supposed master criminal would conceal the single most damning evidence in the most obvious and cliched place to hide something? Ha! And that underscores my next point, that the diamond pin of prosperity is yet to be found. If I had stolen them both, why hide one in an obvious place, then another where the police have yet still to find? I'm not going to accuse anyone else of being the real thief, and therefore the person who planted the evidence while keeping half the spoils for themselves. Not right at this moment anyway. I don't have the resources of the police or prosecutors to chase leads and likely suspects. But how can you not be suspicious of these circumstances? Marissa had raised her voice by this point. Despite her grandiosity, she'd kept her tone civil, even playful. But now she strode about the floor, her jacket swirling in great red arcs. She turned to the prosecution table and approached Veronica, though even with her heels, she stood barely a few inches taller than her adversary sitting up straight. Marissa leaned over the table between them. Veronica held her gaze in as steely a manner as she could muster. She wasn't intimidated, but feared smiling at this bit of theatrics, which might send the wrong message to the jury. They've stacked things so thoroughly against me. A huge team of cops and prosecutors all working to dig up evidence. 3 of my friends called to testify against me. Hundreds of hours of security video. Reams of texts stolen from my phone. All this effort searching for any slip-up, inconsistency, or wrong place, wrong time circumstance. And in the end, their whole case rests on a single, dubious discovery. Marissa whirled on Veronica, her jacket cape swirling like a tornado. She approached the judge, held his eye contact for many moments. Veronica couldn't read her face with her back turned, but Judge Brybar's eyes narrowed, turning from amused to suspicious to worried. Only then did worry enter Veronica's own mind. Could Marissa really have a grand plan to turn the trial on its head, or even to escape? Everyone in this courtroom stands against me. I've been fighting every official and advocate aligned for a single purpose. These whole 7 weeks I've fought. She stood right before the judge now, a dark red fingernail pointed but a meter from his face. "Control yourself," the judge warned, his voice steady. Marissa slowly retreated her hand to her chest, but kept the finger out. Then she approached still further and placed her hands on the edge of the bench. Judge Brybar screwed his face up in an apoplectic grimace. "I kindly ask you to back away," the judge said with barely concealed rage. And Marissa did so. She turned slowly, her jacket an eddy rather than a hurricane. The whole audience appeared to exhale at this drawdown in tension. The calm wouldn't last. The true thief, the true mastermind, is in this courtroom right now. Marissa raised her hand, extending that damning index finger clad in crimson, thrusting it high in the air like the barrel of a smoking gun. The courtroom turned deathly quiet. Marissa twirled her finger in the air, once, twice. A woman screamed in the audience. Several people stood. Veronica noticed the judge fumbling for his gavel. Why was his gavel not to hand? Veronica's photographic memory went to work, rewinding to a minute prior. The gavel had disappeared from the moment Marissa had placed her hands on the bench. When she'd made that dramatic turn, she must have. "Approach, Your Honor," Veronica called out, but was drowned out by the growing tumult of the audience. She stood and shouted, "Approach, Your Honor! Your gavel! She has your gavel in her sleeve!" The chaos intensified, cries and laughter mixing together. Judge Brybar's eyes were wide as Phobos and Deimos in the Martian night sky. The bailiffs stood frozen for a moment, but one caught Veronica's eye. They nodded at each other and sprung into motion. Veronica charged. She couldn't say why, necessarily, but the thought entered her mind that perhaps this was a grand distraction to allow Marissa some clever escape, and that was just too much of an affront to the seasoned prosecutor. It was a breach of decorum to get involved in bailiff duties, but Veronica had been a track athlete in college and had taken basic police training. And there was so much energy in the courtroom. The bailiff, a stocky woman with a tight ponytail, whose expression almost never changed. Her name was Lawrence, Veronica wanted to say, got there first and held Marissa under the arms. Marissa was making a show of struggling without really struggling, calling her capture a brute. Veronica held Marissa's eye contact while she riffled in her sleeves, producing the lost gavel within seconds. "I believe this belongs to you," she said with what she hoped was cinematic showmanship as she cast the gavel onto the bench. Adjourned. Adjourned. Take the defendant into custody. The judge had retrieved the cinematic hammer of justice and was banging it on the bench like a woodpecker. Slowly, the veins in his forehead receded as the bailiffs took Marissa away. Next, the judge leaned down to whisper to Veronica, "Meet me in chambers. I fear we're looking at a mistrial." Of course, a mistrial. Was that Marissa's plan? But how would this help her? More chances to escape, maybe, but then she'd surely earned tighter security from this fiasco. She'd wait in prison for the next trial, and the evidence against her would be as strong as ever. Why had she done this? Why had she made such a scene? But then, she'd so loved playing the lawyer, stirring up drama and having all eyes on her. These last 7 weeks may have been the most exciting of an already legendary life. With this performance, Marissa Towdle hadn't earned her freedom, but she'd earned another shot at being the center of the known universe. The eyes in the forest. The forest was bright and warm. The sunlight dappled across the leaf-covered ground, in a way that evoked images of autumn holiday, brochures, and children laughing. There was a slight breeze rustling the upper branches, but down at ground level, all it did was bring the warmth of the sun in from out in the meadows all around. For everyone not working, it was a weekend to head out and make the most of the last of summer before the cold settled in. It was, I thought, a terrible place for a murder scene. "All right, Andrews?" my boss asked as he came over. Despite the fair weather, he was still clutching a take-out cup of coffee like a lifeline, and I could smell the alcohol from whatever he'd been doing last night. "All right, sir. I didn't think you were on duty today." Judging by the state of Detective Matthews, neither had he. However reckless he was on his nights off, Matthews was a consummate professional out in the field when the public could see him. "Huh, tell me about it." "But 4 bodies in 3 months. No one gets their Saturdays when that happens. Some of us didn't have many Saturdays anyway." But I only gave him a tight smile in response. It wasn't right to bitch about hours and shift patterns when there was a dead body in the vicinity. Another car pulled up into the cordoned off area, and Matthews turned to watch it. It wasn't a vehicle I recognized, but I wouldn't have considered myself an expert on the department's cars. Besides, 4 bodies in 3 months. This was when the top brass got called in, and all the specialists scraped up from wherever they usually lurked. Matthews was having the same thought. More goddamn people sticking their noses in, telling me what to do. He walked back over to the car park, still muttering, leaving me to my solo guard duty. The investigators would go over the area first. Then maybe I'd get called in to help sweep the area. Until then, my contribution to catching a murderer was to stand still and keep people away. Of course, to get to me, they'd have already had to get through 2 other police cordons. I was nothing more than window dressing at this stage. But the more serious the crime, the more window dressing the bosses wanted. Couldn't let the press take a photo of empty space now, could we? Whoever had just turned up seemed to causing something of a stir with the other detectives. They all had more sense than to start shouting. But I recognized the way Matthews had started pacing. A few words drifted across the forest to me, though I didn't get much other than tone. No one was happy about the new person turning up, and I wondered what sort of specialist would cause such a stink. Maybe it's our own Sherlock Holmes, I thought to myself with a snort. It would make the shift more interesting, at least. But there was no way that Sherlock Holmes would work with a modern policing system. All those deductions and assumptions, the evidence courts would be laughing themselves to death. The new arrival was coming my way. I wiped the smirk from my face and stood up a little straighter, staring dead ahead as I watched them out the corner of my eye. Smart suit, skinny glasses, slightly cropped tie, and far younger than I'd expected for a specialist. At a guess, I'd put the man at a few years older than me, early 30s or so, although he could just have had one of those faces that ages well. His height didn't help, and though the ground was uneven, he was about eye level with me when he stopped. "Officer Andrews?" he asked, scanning me up and down. I'd braced for this moment. Who doesn't love a woman in uniform? But there was nothing to his look. It was more like he was trying to read my name on my legs, rather than checking out any curve they may or may not have had. "Yes, sir." Even though he was nameless, anyone out of uniform at a crime scene was pretty much guaranteed to be my superior. Better safe than sorry. "Can you take me down to the crime scene, please? One moment, sir." I'd barely tapped the call button on my radio before Matthews started waving his arm at me and giving the thumbs up. I tried to nod back, though he didn't watch long enough to see. "Right this way, sir." I led the way through the trees to where the body had been found, all the while fighting down the urge to kick the leaves as I went. Precise placement wasn't worth preserving when the leaves were so light and likely to move naturally. But it was hardly very professional. We came round one particularly large tree, meant to keep the victim out of sight, we figured. And there she was. No name, no purse, no shoes, clothing torn. Despite the warm air, I shivered. There was no getting used to this bit. "Here, sir," I said. It was obvious, but it didn't feel right to just wave and go, "Ta-da." Poor woman needed some respect in death, even if she didn't get any in life. "Thank you, Andrews. You can go back to your post now. Are you sure, sir?" Solo investigation. Seriously? And I hadn't even gotten the man's name, let alone his rank or speciality. But Matthews had waved me on. If this went wrong, I could pin the blame on him, right? No, that was childish. "I'm sure. Thank you." As he dismissed me, he knelt down by the body and started looking at it, leaving me to walk away. I turned back half a dozen times, but he didn't seem to be doing anything, just staring, waiting, perhaps. But then what for? Me to leave? My stomach tied itself in knots, and I looked at the dead woman's face. I didn't like leaving her here alone with him. Rank left me with no option, though. I dragged my heavy feet back to where I'd been standing, and was grateful to see that Matthews had wandered closer again. "Sir?" I said as I came up behind him. "What's up?" he asked. Despite the coffee cup hanging empty in his fingers, he looked rougher than he had earlier. Whoever the stranger with the body was, he sure could rile people up. "Am I good to leave him alone?" "Sir?" "Only protocol and all," Matthews snorted. "Ha, protocol? Some fancy arse from God knows where rocks up, and suddenly we're ignoring it. Yeah, it's fine, Andrews. He's got special dispensation. Curiosity got the better of me. How come? Because of his impeccable completion rate. Solved more crimes than half of our department, by all accounts. So the sun shines from him, and we all have to bend over and worship. Damn it. If I knew we'd be standing around with our thumbs up our arses, I'd have gone and gotten another coffee. I bit back all my opinions on what that would do for the twitch under his eye, and watched as he walked away again. Curiosity was still burning inside me. Impeccable completion rate? What did that even mean? And if he worked alone, did that mean he had some secret technique for solving crimes? I headed back to my post, but when I got there, I checked over my shoulder. No one was watching, not that they had any reason to. All the detectives were huddled together, all complaining, judging by the way they folded their arms or put their hands on their hips. They really were quite a melodramatic lot. The other uniforms about were scanning the area, sorting paperwork, checking maps, milling about, trying to look useful. There was no telling when a camera could appear. I slipped past my spot and retraced my steps back to the body. There couldn't be some secret technique for solving crimes. So what exactly was that guy doing? I had to know. And I had to know that it wasn't anything dodgy. Even with clearance from the boss, I'd brought the man out here and I'd left him here. He was my responsibility. Between the crispy leaves and my full uniform, it was hard to sneak. But I did the best I could until I got to a nearby tree. From there, I could lean round and watch the guy work. It took me a few moments and lots of blinking before I registered what I was seeing. The man was crouched on the ground where I'd left him, but he wasn't looking at the woman. He was focused on the pair of squirrels sat across from him, on the other side of the corpse. To add insult to injury, he was talking to them. So it wasn't an attack here. This was just a body dump. My shoulders slumped. A great detective, wonderful record, and his secret technique was explaining things to animals. My brother would talk out programming problems to his dog. But this was just ridiculous. At least, no one else saw my brother doing that. And at least he wasn't doing it for a murder inquiry. Yeah, the man knew her, was crying the whole time. I froze at the other voice. There was no way. Did he say anything? The detective asked. Yeah, the squirrel, replied. Kept apologizing, saying it was an accident. I'm sorry, that sort of thing. And then what? He took her shoes, the other goddamn squirrel said. Then he ripped her shirt, rumpled her clothes and all. She was properly dressed before she got here. He did all that here. Anything else? Don't think so. That all you need? Yes. Thank you. That's most helpful. The detective smiled and nodded at the squirrels before they turned and scurried away. My eyes were dry from the non-blinking staring, and I ran a hand across my face. There was no way I just saw that. Had Matthews infected me with his hangover? The detective pulled out his notebook and jotted down some notes before he looked up and round the clearing. I only just ducked back behind the tree in time. "Is there anyone else?" he said, just loud enough to carry, but not enough to reach back to where the other officers were. Heaven forbid they see him talking to the animals. On cue, a mouse scurried up and perched on a branch sticking out of the leaves. "Yes," it said. "And what did you see?" "See? Not much. But they smelt the same. Her and the one who brought her. Exactly the same? Like they lived together?" "Just so. Thank you. Anything else?" "No. Don't see much, I'm afraid." "No worries. Thank you for your help anyway." The mouse scurried away as the detective made more notes, and the last strand of my sanity snapped. I stormed out from my hiding space, oblivious to the fact I was marching through a crime scene. "All right, what the hell is going on?" I said. The detective jumped to his feet, guilty as though he'd killed the woman, before a carefully schooled expression took over. "I am investigating this murder, officer. You should be back at your post." "No, none of that. What the hell is happening? How the hell are the animals talking? And why the hell are you so calm about it?" "Miss, I can assure you..." He cut off mid-sentence and stared at me as though I was the weird one in this scenario. "Hang on? Talking? Don't pull that crap with me. I saw you taking notes. You heard them, but so did you." "You heard the animals talking?" "Yes, but how?" He ignored the anguish in my voice and just kept staring. I was halfway through, weighing up whether to just punch him, assaulting a superior, and how would I explain why, when he broke into huge grin. I hadn't realized how morose he'd looked before, and I blushed at the sheer childlike joy on his face. "I've never met anyone else like this before," he whispered. "Hey, prove it. Mouse, come back." The mouse scurried up again, though it shuffled away when it saw me. "Yes?" The detective spun to me and nodded. "Go on, talk to it." I said. Would this count as playing along? Or was I losing my mind as well? For the first time in my life, I wanted nothing more than to be on guard duty. "Hello? Mouse?" "Greetings," the mouse said with a little bow. I shook my head. I wasn't bowing to a mouse. "Yes, fine. Greetings. Are we done now?" I asked the detective. "Because I am currently talking to a mouse, and I would like some explanations. One more thing," he said. "Ask it about the weather. Are you for real right now? Just do it." I rolled my eyes, but academy training was hard to kick. Someone says jump, you ask how high, or ask after the weather. "How's the weather?" I said to the mouse with a wild grin on my face. "Fair," the mouse replied. "The leaves are falling early this year, but the rain has stayed off for now." "Great." The detective took a step towards me and peered at my face. What did he say? You heard what it said. No, you tell me. Repeat what the mouse said. Shaking my head at the stupidity of the statement, I did as I was told. The leaves are falling early, but the rain has stayed off for now. Is that it? Are we done with this madness now? You really did hear it. Yes, I told you that. Yes, I'm sorry. I just had to make sure that you weren't lying. All sense of decorum went out the window. Look, mate, of all the things I'm going to lie about, I can hear mice complain about the weather isn't one of them. The detective ran a hand across his hair and smiled sheepishly. Yeah, guess not. I'm sorry. Like I said, I've never met anyone else who can do this. I had to be sure, but you know, how? How are we hearing animals talk? No idea. I've never found any explanation or even a suggestion that it's happened before. Then how did I discover it? I used to do it as a kid, but then I figured it was just something wrong with my head. One day, I got fed up at a crime scene, saw a squirrel, and asked for help. And it led me right to where the stolen goods had been stashed. Insurance fraud. And I proved it in about 10 minutes. From there, it just kind of grew. So what, your Detective Inspector Doolittle? He laughed and looked even younger as years of secrets drifted away from him. Something like that, I guess. What happened here then? He looked down at the body, and the smile dropped. Accidental death. Deliberate dumping. She died in her home, I reckon. Maybe a fight. Maybe sheer unhappy chance. Her partner panicked. Knew about all the murders out here, so came and dumped her here. Maybe he's got a record or something. But I've got a registration number for the car, so we can go and check it out. By the sounds of it, he's feeling guilty, so it shouldn't take long to push him to a confession. I had been nodding along till I fixated on one word. We? He looked back at me and blushed. I thought so. I mean, I could use a hand working all these cases, and you can work the same way as me. Hold on, you mean become a detective? Don't you want to? I mean, in truth, I hadn't thought about it until then. My eyes fell to the corpse again. How many things had she been planning to do, or put off doing? I had to swallow the lump out my throat before I could answer, though. All right, I'm in. Assuming you can sort it with the boss. The detective grinned at me. I have a lot of pull. I can figure something out. He stuck his hand out, which I took. Detective Inspector Christopher Griffiths, Officer Iris Andrews. A pleasure to meet you, Iris. Now, let's go talk to a murderer, shall we? Off with their heads. Yes, Mother. I sigh into the line, wrapping the infamous cord around my finger. Of course, I'm fine. What? No, it's not like I'm in the States. This is Britain, God damn it. Mother, no, I think you should lie down for a while. Call Dad as well. He'd fancy a visit from you, I'm sure. And just like that, My hand smashes back on the receiver. Blood, Britain, eh? Who could ever have imagined Olivia, from the apartment up above, would pursue law in England? Well, for starters, certainly not her. A buggy sweeps by my rusted telephone box as I take a single drag on the cigarette laid before me in its little red tin box. Rainwater nearly splashes up on my impeccable outfit, the poor thing. I shake my fist at the driver, but there's no use. The lad's already way off into the distance. What would the world be without Britain? Perhaps every world has some sort of Britain as well. Little men in their fancy outfits, always circling each other with arguments. At least they're nothing like that bloody American man. What was his name again? Nixon, was it? Yes. Terrible, terrible people doing amazing things. I've always found it fascinating, you know. My red kitten heels splash against more rainwater. I curse myself silently for not bringing that little red umbrella with me. Perhaps I could pick it up on my way to the office. Their stares don't avoid me as I run by. I can catch those disgusting men from the corner of my eye, all staring. It's not as if I'm putting on a show, is it? Still, I can only imagine what they see. A French woman, plush red lips against fair skin. I even tried to wear my longer crimson dress today. Turns out that effort proved fruitless. I jump into the office, gasping as the heat blasts me behind the wooden panels. In the background, I can hear softer jazz clashing with news reports from the telly, as if warring between each other. What is it this time? I ask Bonnie, the sharp woman sitting at the desk, or as she urges me to call her, Bonbon. Ridiculous name. Her bleached curls pull up nicely against her dark skin and bright yellow dress. She swears it's from that damn swinging Britain stage we're going through right now. She shrugs, leaning over to stare at the Pixel E screen. Those Beetle kids are going to broke up, she snaps back, leaning into the plush sides of her chair. The corners of her mouth edge up slightly as she stares at the messily done bun in my hair. How do you get your hair like that? Oh, I grin back, picking up the large manila folder before her. Do shut up. What's our next case? It's hard to say. Bonbon plucks a pen from her container, absent-mindedly scribbling on her schedule paper. They ordered us to take up all the spots for the month. All of them? My eyebrows shoot up as I feel my face grow red with anger. The audacity. Who do they think they are to order us around? There are nearly 1 million clients in London, all looking for lawyers. And yet this flash bastard thinks he's important enough to take all her attention. This is the case. She heaves more mundane folders toward me, all packed to the brim with paper. I know. It's a lot. You might even need to help us with this one, I tease. Not my style. Bonnie slumps back. Olivia, Some of us girls aren't meant to be smart. We're just supposed to smile and look pretty. Some of us don't get enough funds to go to Oxford either, or travel back and forth from France. I ignore the dig. It's odd how Bonnie and I see ourselves as adults, despite both of us only just being able to drink. Right when I graduated from Oxford, I got accepted into this law firm, the best one in London. Sometimes I wonder if I'd even stay here without the job. Britain is just so dreary. It's quite depressing, especially at first glance. Maybe that's all it deserves. My heels clack down the hallway as I desert the drab lobby. When I finally reach my own personalized office, I feel as if I'm at home. I strut to the opalescent gramophone occupying the corner, placing a thin record upon it. Half my collection is sonata, while the other is all that new style of rock. I believe those critics have begun to call it punk. Whatever the case, it's the only connection I have to my generation. I often find myself discarded in this new, modern era. People believe there is to be so much more, but I can't possibly imagine what could come next. I sit at my small desk, shuffling through the papers that have been so graciously presented to me without haste. How does one look through these documents with such excitement, anyhow? I prefer the thrill of the courtroom to the dual sensation of passing through files and archives. Nevertheless, one needs to begin a task for them to finish it. After nearly 2 hours of reading, Bonnie returns to my office with a cup of tea and the person I'd least like to see right now. Darcy places a hand onto my desk, snatching the tea from Bonnie's hand. "I thought you'd like some tea," she whispers in an accusatory manner. "I see," I groan. "So much so that you grabbed it straight from Bonnie's hand." Darcy snaps her long white fingers. "Leave, pest. Make yourself useful and sort through the files." I all read. Our boss pulls her emerald-colored nails through her platinum blonde hair. "Who's to say I didn't mess them up while you were wasting time?" Bonnie's gum snaps as she pulls it back in from its bubble. "Course, miss," as her thin legs carry her off down the drab walls. Darcy smashes her fists on my desk before traveling to the gramophone, looking down with distaste. "I find all parts of your music taste disgusting." "Thanks," I mumble, returning to my work. "Now that you've given me some tea and made fun of my music, you can leave. I simply can't figure out how you work with this rock in the background." "First of all," I sigh, throwing down some more papers to the floor. Darcy's eyes widen, but I only shrug. "There's a method to my madness. They taught me some amazing things in your British college, you know?" "Ah, yes," she laments. "The French girl decides to bless us with her knowledge. You know." Darcy dumps more papers onto the floor. "In London, we don't do things with madness. We are intelligent Young women in a time of enlightenment. By the way, I didn't notice you at the Women's March last week. Were you busy? Darcy, I reply hastily. You know I'm all for women's rights. Of course, there are things that I'd rather be doing than marching for them. What? She squawks, almost knocking over a clock now leaning dangerously toward the ground. She attempts to upright it, only to leave it tilted on its side. I suppose it's for the best. It's not like I often leave this small office. But then, if we march for it, people ridicule us. I'd rather work on letters to Parliament. And pray tell, where are these letters? I feel my face grow red as I bolt up. There better be a point to this meeting. Darcy backs away from my outburst, sighing. I wanted to ask you what you thought of the case. Dr. Sherman came into his house late at night. I recall the words from the page now lying on the checkerboard carpet. His daughter was still at the secondary school's dance recital, one she only feigned interest in. Darcy raises an eyebrow. I didn't remember anything like that in the case. I only assumed apologies. I'm sorry. Alice just brought a lot of attention to herself. Anyway, where were we? The very beginning, I believe. Precisely. I pretend not to notice the acid in her voice. Dr. Sherman swears that he was missing a certain object from his house. However, the object seems to be missing from the case. That's what I wanted to show you. Darcy nods. She flicks a paper toward my desk, containing only a black and white picture. I squint between the grainy pixels, making out an image. He's really suing for a hat? That hat costs over $100,000. Darcy discloses, snatching the photo back into her brown briefcase. But then, why is he suing for $1 million? I ask, still incredulous. He believes Blake Connery stole the hate. She adjusts her glasses before turning her back on me. Didn't you read the report? Of course I did. She sniffs at the outburst. Mr. Connery went to Sherman's house to go over their last meeting. Something about therapy, I believe. Perhaps this case could help you? Darcy points a pen towards me. You could use some anger management, and with that, the dastardly woman exits stage left, a smug smile still plastered on her face. Is it possible to hit a glass ceiling when your boss is a woman? Still, it's hard for me to believe it. And so you see, the red-faced man before me spits. That's why the hammer of justice must be brought down. My house was ravaged by this madman. I wouldn't dare say it for any of my other patients, but Blake Connery is a psychopath. Well, I can sense his anger rising even higher than mine as I look over the report. When you gave us access to your notes, it didn't seem as if Mr. Connery had any sort of mental illnesses besides his bipolar disorder. Exactly. He stands up, almost sloshing tea on my immaculate red dress. When Darcy had permitted me to interview Dr. Sherman, I'd expected someone much less unhinged. Why is it that the mad are always the most composed. He put on a farce. Dr. Sherman sits back down, crossing his hands. It's almost obvious that he's trying to pull some therapeutic shit on me. Of course, it'd take a lot more than that to faze me. Either Sherman's a bad therapist, or he truly is under a lot of stress from losing his hat. He made me believe that he's not a bloody thief. Let's not jump to accusations about the defendant. I place the papers back into their files to stop him from seeing the work I've already done. It wouldn't do for my client to already know I believe he's insane. Oh? A mousy blonde jumps into the scene, perhaps around 16. Nearly the age I was when I first came to this despicable city. Ignore Papa's ravings. He's just angry still, and rightfully so. For a moment, I'm afraid that he'll slap the girl I've already assumed to be Alice, but he laughs it off. Perhaps she has a therapeutic herself. Despite that fact, something bubbles inside of me as I stare at her in the slightly blue dress. It's my most prized possession. I can make you another, Papa. Alice leans down to hug her father's neck. He smiles, then turns back to me, the joy already wiped off his face. What can I say? I have that effect on some people. I'm sure you can, my butterfly, but we must bring down justice. And with that, I'm immediately done. I've gathered almost useless information, and then it daunts on me. This is what it's going to be like for a straight month, maybe more. This is what I despise about this city. Everything is either gloomy or wonderful. The people, the jobs, the world. But one thing stays the same. In fact, that's the charm of it. Everything is stagnant, orbiting around the world. We all get a chance to be in the spotlight, and sometimes that's the worst part. I think I have enough information for today, I sigh, placing my tea down with a slow clink. Is it enough to incarcerate the bastard? You're suing him, I remind Dr. Sherman. He's not going to jail? Ha! When I'm done with him, I'm sure that won't be the case. I hired the entirety of the best law firm in the city to work on my case. I can't lose. I'm done arguing with him. On any other day, I'd gladly debate with him until he realizes how much of a damn fool he is. But today, it's almost impossible. The streets are nearly deserted for a crisp May day. I can hear the roars of a crowd in the distance, but there's no one on this street. I check my watch, disappointing myself almost immediately. It's still technically my lunch break, and I haven't found anything useful yet. I'd usually be good and done by now. Instead, I'm stuck in this rabbit hole of a case. No evidence, and I'm surrounded by lunatics. Just my luck, naturally. Eventually, I'm face to face with the source of the crowd's cheering. A band plays upon a large wooden stage, surrounded by small bulbs holding dead string lights. It doesn't take long to find a familiar face. Bonnie? She twists around, staring at me in fear. Her voice comes out way too fast, almost like Dr. Sherman's. Okay, look, don't tell Darcy. I just heard they were playing today, and I'm not telling Darcy, I urge. Anyway, they're pretty good. Better than anyone else on the radio, at least. What's their name? The Hatters. Bonnie shrugs. I know. It's weird. No? I shake my head. More like a coincidence. Ugh. She hangs her tan arms around my neck, jumping to the dark, sporadic beat. Are you still on that case? Well, Bonnie. My voice drifts off before I can dish out a biting comment. Wait. How do you know about the case? She blushes deep red. I might have read it. You did? I laugh incredulously, fixing it immediately after. No, I'm just surprised. That's great. I could use some help. But what made you decide it? Well, Bonnie shrugs. I just wanted to help out, I guess. I'm always just the girl behind the desk, the one with a smile. I saw how you stood up to Darcy, and her thoughts are interrupted by perhaps the cutest man eclipsing the world. A guitar held in his dark hands. His curls are covered in a thin sheen of sweat as he smiles toward us. It takes me a moment and a jab from Bonnie to realize it's me he's smiling at. Hey, he flashes us a gleaming grin, tipping a tall top hat, clashing directly with his leather and chains. Name's Blake, and just like that, the conversation is ruined. No? The smile fades a little as the band on stage drifts off. I guess he's their central power source. I can't understand. I blush profusely. No, it's not you. I just mean, you're Blake Connery, I assume. Bonnie's eyes flash with fear at the notion. I mean, I know it's random. It's mad, but it's so me. Was it fate that brought us together? He brushes past Bonnie. But for once, I don't see her angry that a man is ignoring her. I can see the emotions warring in her mind. On one side, we know that I'm going to have to possibly rob him of all his money. On the other hand, he's hot. You know my name. Well, I pull out the manila folder, reaching for the picture displaying him I grabbed from Dr. Sherman's office. I also have your file. He doesn't display the reaction I expected. He leans back, staring down at his watch. You're working for Sherman, huh? That seems to be the case. So, Bonbon leans back, grabbing her bright yellow purse. I should probably. She leaves her bleach blonde curls bouncing in the wind. Can I just tell you? I try to imitate his smile, only to completely cringe. That man is clearly insane. That gives him a laugh. It's his daughter, Alice? Now I have to stifle my chuckle. But she's innocent. That's just what she wants you to believe. Say, how about you stick with me, and you win this case for me? I have heaps of knowledge for you. And I suppose you know this because you're an expert lawyer? Dr. Sherman holds all his meetings in his house, Blake recites. I was there lawfully, and I never stole his hat. But we don't have the security cameras. I beg your pardon, Sherman has cameras. And even if he won't give you access, I will. And you lawfully took these? Ya got me there. Blake stares sheepishly down toward the folder. I have connections. And that isn't shady at all. If you've been having a bad time in this city, it's because you haven't been living like me. I know it all. That doesn't answer my question, genius. Look. Connery stares back at the clock again. Are you on a break? I have about an hour or two before I need to return to the office. Sherman cut the meeting short. Have lunch with me. I promise that by the end of it, you'll be swayed to my side. And what does that mean? He produces a wallet, holding up a wad of cash. Whatever Sherman paid you will look like a joke compared to what I can give you. I'll even give you more than just money. Okay. I blush. Let's just lead the way, gladly. Miss Olivia. Blake flashes me another dangerous smile. I believe this will be the beginning of a great union. Murder at Ex-Ircon. The extreme ironing convention was infamous in Preston. For the last 8 years, extreme ironers from around the world fell upon the city. Their antics in the streets caused emergency calls for days. Ironing on top of city buses. Ironing while hang gliding over downtown. Ironing while belaying down the cupola of City Hall. Every year, there was one incident that truly left its mark on Preston. This year, the incident would be the death of Sean Morrison. I looked down at Sean's body, his face brutalized by a blunt object. In any other situation, identifying the murder weapon might have been tricky. But not here. Not at Ex-Ircon. There was no mistaking the iron-shaped dent in the dead man's head. I had seen it before. I clenched my fists, remembering the day that my wife had been murdered 8 years ago. The image of her face haunted my nightmares. Beautiful until it had been ruined by a Bosch TDA 2650 G-Bide quick fill, the highest rated iron of 2012. Preston's coroner had estimated the time of death at about 2:15 a.m. The murder weapon had not been found yet, and the trail of blood leading out of Sean's hotel suite had run cold quickly. No witnesses had come forward. The extreme ironing community was notoriously tight-knit and likely to protect their own. They had done so in the past. Detective Clay, they're ready. A police officer on scene had separated the suspects, and she handed me a list of names. I squared my shoulders and got started with the interview process. Anna Kruger, the hotel manager, was already in Sean's suite pacing around and surveying the extensive damage. Pieces of drywall and broken glass littered the carpet, and the telltale burn marks of overly hot irons defaced the furniture and carpet. I watched her until she stopped mid-pace near the end table next to the couch and knelt down. Anna stuck her arm in a hole in the wall and pulled out a Panasonic A66K automatic iron. I never would have allowed these extreme ironing United States assholes to have XIRCon here again if I weren't so hard up for money. At least they rented out the entire place. Anna glared at the iron-shaped hole in the drywall. They always ruin something. They leave burns and run up the electric bills, plugging in all their stupid irons. She raised her eyes to meet mine and brandished the iron. But this time, Sean went too far. When was the last time you saw him, Ms. Kruger? He came down last night, around 11, asking for more towels. She pointed at a pile of charred towels near the couch. I can see why he asked. Anna held out the Panasonic iron, her hand shaking. The temperature gauge is on the highest setting. He was burning things on purpose. If he were still alive, I'd sue him into oblivion. Miss Kruger, do check with that ironing board vendor, detective. I had to chase him out of the storage room around 2:30 this morning. Mighty suspicious, if you ask me. Errol Fleming, the owner of the Cleveland Ironing Board Company, leaned against the wall in his room. That damned Sean, he growled, German accent thick on his tongue. He ruined me. He posted negative reviews of my new ironing board design and used his extreme ironing championship fame and influence to boost them. Go on, the Cleveland steamer. It was a board made specifically for steam irons. Sean was a proponent of steam irons, but he said my board had a shitty design. His was the #1 review on Amazon. Everyone saw it. My profits tanked. No one bought. I am glad he is gone. I'm sure his negative reviews were the only reason no one bought the board. Errol's eyes widened, and he straightened his back. I am not happy he is dead. That is a terrible thing to say. I am innocent, of course. Mr. Fleming, can you tell me what you were doing in the storage closet last night? Color rose to his cheeks. I cannot say. It would ruin me. I thought your business was already ruined by Mr. Morrison. Yes, my beautiful Cleveland steamer. But I had other boards in development. What does this have to do with your excursion? Errol sucked in a breath and held it until I thought he might faint. Finally, he breathed out and answered. I was looking at the hotel's ironing boards. I frowned. I couldn't come up with any good ideas, he wailed. I was looking for inspiration. You can't tell anyone that I'm an ironing board design fraud. Errol slumped back against the wall. Gottverdammt, he whispered. Thank you for your time, Mr. Fleming. Please, wait. You should talk to the tall man with curly hair. I saw him sneaking out of Sean's room last night, after 2. Thomas Prince. The tall man with curly hair was Thomas Prince, a longtime advocate for the use of steam irons over dry irons in the extreme ironing competition world. Thomas was a prolific donor to Kickstarter campaigns for new steam iron technology, and he wielded a Rowenta DW52701 Focus Excel steam iron during competitions. He looked up from the hotel bed when I walked in, eyes red and puffy. "Detective, I hear you were out late." "Yeah, I went to see Sean." "Any particular reason?" "We're friends." Thomas frowned and corrected himself. "Were friends, Mr. Prince. Your visit makes you the last person to see Sean alive." "That doesn't mean anything. Have you talked to Noah yet? He was going to drop some major news on us tonight, and Sean got wind of it yesterday. He was so upset." "What news?" "Sean wanted to take over EOS. He thought Noah was doing a shit job, and he's never been shy about voicing his opinion. Noah threatened him, so Sean took a swing, caught him right in the jaw. Good thing he has a weak punch." "Go on." Thomas leaned back. "Not much else to say. I went to Sean's room to talk him down after that. He was pretty shaken up and talking about leaving EUs completely. Noah had really gotten him riled up. I appreciate the information. In the meantime, I would like you to stay right here." Thomas shot me an annoyed look. "Am I still a suspect? You were seen leaving Sean's room last night, and his body was found this morning. I'd say you're the primary suspect. I called for additional officers to watch Thomas's room, while one officer remained inside. Noah Bowers." I approached the sullen president of Extreme Ironing United States, Noah Bowers, in the hotel's business center. He looked up from his seat at a small conference table. Before I could say anything, Noah spoke. "You think I did it, don't you?" "I didn't say that, but you know I threatened him, right?" "Well, he threatened me first. I didn't want him to, think I was intimidated." Noah stood up and spun one of the chairs. "Look, bro, Sean was a dick, okay? That's no secret. So he wanted to oust me and, take over as president of the EIUS. That doesn't mean I killed him." I said nothing. Noah grunted and crossed his arms. "If you really want to know who did it, you should talk to his fiancée, Maren, bro. She was gonna, poison him or something." Maren knocked. I visited Maren in her hotel room. She was sitting calmly on the hotel bed, watching a reality show, and she didn't bother to look up as I entered the room. "I understand you found Sean this morning, Ms. Knox." "Sure did. I went in to make sure he was up in time for the convention. He liked to sleep in." "You had access to his room?" She stared at me. "Duh. We were engaged." "You don't seem upset that your fiancé was murdered." Maren shrugged. "I'm not. He was an abusive, cheating piece of shit, and I was going to end things tonight. But now I have to thank someone for saving me the trouble." "I understand you were planning to poison Sean." Maren cocked a thin brow. Why would I poison him when I could leave him? That's why I got my own room in the first place. I was thinking of putting eye drops in his food so he'd shit his guts out. So yeah, maybe that's technically poisoning him. But he wouldn't have died or anything. It's still an actionable offense, Ms. Knox, whatever. Like I said, I didn't do it. She paused in thought. You should talk to Eddie. I saw him arguing with Sean yesterday. It looked pretty heated, but I didn't stick around to listen. Probably something to do with steam versus dry irons again. Eddie's crazy for dry irons. Eddie Wu was doodling on hotel stationery. But he put the pen down as I walked into his room. I understand you and Mr. Morrison exchanged words yesterday. We have the same argument every time we see each other, Eddie said, sitting up a little straighter. He's always going on about steam iron superiority, but he fails to see the beauty and simplicity of a classic dry iron. When did you last see Mr. Morrison? Eddie continued, as though I hadn't spoken. Using a dry iron is an art form. He walked across the room towards an ornate case. Let me show you. That's okay, my iron, he cried out in panic. Eddie showed me the empty case. Where is it? How? Eddie sank to his knees, tears spilling from his eyes. My glorious iron. I can't believe it's gone. Mr. Wu, I don't care about your needs, detective. What about mine? My iron is missing. The perfect sole plate, unblemished by steam holes, polished to a high shine. Did you know I had a custom handle built to fit my hand perfectly? My heart skipped a beat, and an image of my wife thrust itself into my head. The iron mark on her face wasn't perfectly smooth. There were spots, steam holes, but Sean's mark had no holes. He was killed with a dry iron. Mr. Wu? I said, struggling to keep my voice even. Who else here is a dry iron aficionado? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. Eddie grinned like the Cheshire Cat. Sean Morrison. Did anyone else know? Eddie shrugged. This is a small world, detective. It's hard to hide something so scandalous. His grin faded. You should talk to Thomas. Thomas Prince. Thomas jerked up in surprise as I walked in the door. He set aside the iron he was cradling and wiped a tear from his eye. Mr. Prince, how well do you know the others at this convention? Well, me and Sean go way back, of course. Eddie's been around for a while. We don't agree on irons, but he's a nice guy. Marin came into the mix a couple years ago. Noah's been the president of EIUS for a long time, but he mostly keeps to himself. I don't know him that well. Do you know if anyone might have a motive to harm Mr. Morrison? Marin and Sean have been together for a long time, but that's been falling apart. Thomas made a face. She's a real piece of work. I wouldn't trust her with my iron under any circumstances, but I don't really know the others well enough to say. I took a deep breath. Did you know that Sean was secretly into dry irons? Thomas winced. I went to visit him after he argued with Noah. He was really stressed out. I don't think he meant to tell me, but he slipped up. He told me about his preference for dry irons. Go on. I was shocked, you know. We had spent years talking about the merits of steam irons over dry. Thomas threw his hands in the air. I mean, you can use a steam iron as a dry iron. But he just kept talking about how cool Eddie's iron was. Thomas stood and walked to the window. I asked him if I could have his championship-winning steam iron. And I know it was kind of selfish to even ask, but it's a steam iron. He faced me, his mouth hard. If he was so into dry irons, there's no reason he needed to keep that one. I knew the answer already. He said no. Thomas hung his head. Yeah, that's when I noticed it. A plug barely poked out from under the hotel's dresser. Thomas noted my pause and followed my gaze. We lunged at the same time, but I reached the dresser first, knelt, and yanked the cord, and there it was. The Oster Heavyweight GCSTD 1109 Classic, stained with what was surely the victim's blood. Eddie Wu's missing iron. I expected to fight my way out of the situation, but Thomas sat down heavily and exhaled. I didn't mean to kill him. I backed away from Thomas to the room door. Sean had Eddie's iron in his room. He was messing with it. I think he was trying to break it so Eddie wouldn't win in today's competition. Thomas groaned. And that was bad enough. If the sponsors found out, we'd lose all those investments. But when he refused to give me his steam iron, I just snapped. I stuck my head out the door and motioned for the nearest officer to assist me. Before I could even think about what I was doing, Sean was on the floor, and I was holding Eddie's iron. I brought it back here to hide it, but you see how much good that did me. Thomas looked down at his hands. I'll never iron again. The officer casually entered the room. I won't resist, he said, looking straight at me. I messed up. Mr. Prince, please remain still, the officer said gently as she bent down and handcuffed Thomas's hands behind his back. The officer led Thomas away, but the satisfaction of solving the case rang hollow in my heart. I returned to other suspects to tell them they were free to go. When I got to Marin's room, she simply nodded and started packing her things. But there was something I had to know. Did you know your boyfriend was a dry iron promoter? Marin's eyes widened. Sean's been advocating the benefits of steam irons, both in competition and in the home, for years. The slight tremble in her voice gave her away. She was hiding something. What aren't you telling me, Ms. Knox? She stared at the floor and bit her lip. Look, he'd always use a steam iron for shows and competitions because that's what people expected. He had a sponsor to please, a wealthy one, but behind closed doors, Marin took a deep, shuddering breath. Behind closed doors, we used a dry iron. She buried her face in her hands. Oh God, you can't tell anyone. His reputation would be destroyed. The sponsor would pull all their funding out of the projects he and Thomas were working on. Like what? They had an idea to improve this older model steam iron, right? To make it more efficient and easier to clean. The steam holes on that model were tough to clean, but it was otherwise a great iron. I would even use it sometimes when he wasn't at home. I liked it better than his dry iron. She laughed sadly. He would have been so mad. Marin stood up and started to pace. Anyway, he never got a new steam iron, so he always used the same one. His championship iron. It was iconic, blue and white. Have you ever seen it? Something in her voice made me uneasy. Let me show you, Marin continued. It's beautiful, Xavier. How do you know my name? She opened a decorative case near the foot of the hotel bed and pulled out an iron. My blood ran cold. It was a Bosch TDA 2650 Jeep quick fill. Marin smirked at my expression. You recognize it, don't you? Or rather, you recognize the shape of the sole plate. It was the same one that killed your wife 8 years ago. She stepped closer, her grin widening. He did it, you know? Sean killed her. She found out his secret obsession with dry irons, and he couldn't allow her to talk. I inched my hand towards my concealed pistol. Put the Bosch down, Marin. You don't have to do this. Marin raised the iron, her pupils dilated with madness. But I've always wanted to know what it felt like, what it could feel like to kill someone. She swung the iron towards my head, barely missing. I called for backup and pulled out my pistol to defend myself. I don't want to shoot you. 2 police officers swept into the room before I had to take any further actions. Marin was quickly disarmed and handcuffed. She glared at me as the officers pulled her from the room, but she said nothing further. My heart ached with memories of my wife. Whether he knew it or not, Thomas had given her a little bit of justice. But that didn't excuse his actions. He would be behind bars for a long time. Marin would serve time for being an accessory to murder, for covering up Sean's crimes. I would have preferred to see Sean stand trial, to look into his face with satisfaction as the bailiffs hauled him away. I would have to content myself knowing the truth of my wife's murder had finally been ironed out. Revenge is best served from the dead. My name is Danny Donahue, and I am not your ordinary 14-year-old boy from Southern California. Well, I guess I may be ordinary, except for one teeny thing, but I guess that normal. Nobody is just ordinary. Heck, what does ordinary even mean? I guess I will never know. Because I am not your ordinary boy. I am Danny Donahue, the boy who helps ghosts cross into their next life. Movies weren't wrong. There are ghosts on Earth, and sometimes they might get stuck on Earth because they have unfinished business with someone or themselves. Ugh. They can't even get peace after they die. I thought, when we die, we are finally at peace. I guess, sadly not. Most of the time, it's something simple, like apologizing to someone, or something similar to that. But other times, it was hard. It wasn't because a task was too hard or complicated. No, it was because the ghosts themselves didn't even know what they had left to do. And that is something frustrating. I know what you may be thinking. What do his parents think? Probably think he belongs in the lunny bin. If you thought that, you thought wrong. His parents, Estelle and Banrable Donahue, possessed the same abilities their son had. But this story is my weirdest adventure yet. I still wonder if it actually even happened. It's kind of crazy, and Danny doesn't want to brag or anything, but he was quite awesome, if he had to say. This story started when my family and I had moved from Southern California to New York City. We only had moved here because this was the city populated with wandering souls, which just meant more stress on me. My social life was non-existent. My parents had homeschooled me since 2nd grade, when I began helping them out. But this unbelievable, well, me saying ghosts are real is already quite unbelievable, story started when I moved into my family's new apartment in the busy part of New York. When my parents weren't super cool ghost helpers, they were journalists. And might I add, mighty fine when they did their work. But that meant they barely had time to spend with me. I had opened the bright red door to the quite large apartment, opening my arms and breathing the new place in. I was quite excited to be living here. I never had been to New York before, and it seemed magical. When I had walked into my plain, empty room, I spotted a ghost. Great, can't even sleep one night without someone barging in. Danny grumbled to himself. I didn't think the ghost boy saw me. Who wouldn't? I am pretty handsome, Danny thought, running a hand through his thick black hair. I don't think the dead boy had seen me, and if he had, he hadn't acknowledged me yet. Then the ghost boy had walked over to me from fiddling the sustains and slammed the door behind me. I just realized that the ghost thought I couldn't see him. After I realized that I went over to the formerly alive boy and said hi. Never thought I would have spooked a ghost, but I guess I did, because it looked like the ghost seemed startled. You can see me. The tall ghost pointed up and down to himself, unsure. Since I'm talking to you, I'm pretty sure I can, I said, as it was obvious. Sorry, I'm really dead. The best scenario would be that I was dreaming, but am not, right? The ghost mumbled on. No, you are sadly dead, and I'm alive, and I can see you. but other people can't. Well, most people can't. By the way, my name is Danny," he stated while putting down boxes of his random junk on the floor. "Well, nice to meet you, Danny. My name is Nicholas." The ghost, Nicholas, smiled at him. "Danny, come here. We need your help." Danny's dad hollered from outside the apartment. I was sure the whole floor could hear him. "Sure thing." "Wait, hold on. You and your parents are going to be living here?" Nicholas questioned. "And can they see me? Or are you like some chosen one thing?" "Yes, and yes. My parents can see ghosts too. And our job is to help you move on," Danny said, opening the door and walking over to help his parents. But Nicholas had stayed in the same spot, not wanting to talk to Danny's parents. After all, he hadn't had any interaction with a living or a dead person in 2 years. He had gotten used to staying in the shadows and just listening to other people talk. I had come back with another enormous and heavy box and dropped it on the floor, making a loud whump sound. "So, Nicholas," Danny said, testing his name on how it felt in his mouth. "Why are you still here?" "I don't know." Nicholas shrugged. "Then think of something stopping you from resting in peace." Then I walked back out of my room to grab more boxes. I had told my parents I had to set up my room and didn't want them to see it, only after I finished, so I would have an excuse to stay in my room. And plus, Nicholas didn't want to see my parents for some reason. Nicholas and I talked in hushed whispers for hours that day, but he still couldn't think of any reason why he would still be a ghost. But a ghost, technically, is a person who is only partially dead. But he could think of anything. I had, though, learned that Nicholas was 47, but he had died 2 years ago in a drowning accident. I had urged him to tell me the reason for how he drowned, but he didn't say. Until an hour of my excellent persuasion, he told me that he couldn't swim and died before anyone got to him. I always knew I had good convincing skills. A couple of days passed, and still nothing. Danny just wanted to bring Nicholas to his parents, but Nicholas always refused. Ugh, if I went up to him, they would have probably figured out the reason for his reason to stay with the living. "Okay, Danny, I think I might know why I am not really dead yet," Nicholas huffed out. He seemed slightly embarrassed, but more so angry. "Finally! Been waiting for this for a while," Danny said, stretching back on his chair, taking a break from an easy he had to complete by 2 hours. "Okay, so I lied. I didn't die by drowning, just to let you know I can swim. But I was drowned by my kids exactly 2 years ago. And I think the forgive and forget part hasn't exactly worked. And I think I might want revenge on those brats," Nicholas said in a hushed voice, not sure if he really trusted Danny. But if Danny said that he could help him, he might finally get avenged for his death. My eyes literally felt like they might come out of my eye sockets. "Hold on, buddy. Just what?" Danny said, shock clearly visible on his face. The ghost I always helped had simple tasks, and maybe once in a blue moon, it might be a little interesting. But this was just out of this world crazy. No more like out of the universe. So basically, you're telling me that you were some rich dude with spoiled brats for kids, and then when you were about to die, you decided to change your will so that your sister gets most of it? Danny asked, still thinking this was a really small reason to kill your dad, even if he was a billionaire and didn't even give you 1% of it. Yes, but you see, before I could change the will, they somehow found out about me changing it, so they killed me, so they would get over 80% of my money and estate. What happened to your wife? Danny wondered. She died a year before me, Nicholas said, with a sad smile, probably remembering his wife. So what do you want to do? I'm assuming you want payback, Danny said, raising an eyebrow. Yes, and I have been planning it for 2 years, so it's basically foolproof, Nicholas said with a smile. Family drama. Danny chuckled a little while thinking this. Then, that day, Nicholas told me what he had in mind, and I am not going to lie. It was quite clever. I guess when you have 2 years to think of a plan, and not any plan, a plan to get revenge on your killers, you would want to perfect it. Nicholas had been living in Danny's room for almost a year, and since Nicholas started living in this apartment, he always scared future tenants. Except for the Donahues, because they could see him. The strange thing was my parents still hadn't spotted Nicholas yet. Strange indeed. Nicholas had been living in this apartment specifically because it was right next to, you would never guess who, his kids' apartments. Every time he saw them, he felt sadness for what he let them become. But then the sadness turned into anger, and his blood started boiling whenever he looked at them for what he did to him. The next day, we started putting Nicholas's plan into action. But for one part of it, I had to borrow something from my parents without raising suspicion. I had to borrow a special drink that if a ghost drank it, they would be invisible, but be able to touch not too heavy stuff. I thought talking the elixir would be difficult, but it proved to be easy, since my mom was out meeting some new friends she had made, and my dad had gone grocery shopping. So I took the elixir with ease. After he got it, he gave it to Nicholas, and Nicholas slurped the dark bluish liquid down with one gulp. Slow down, Nicky. You don't want to get a stomach ache, Danny teased. First off, don't call me Nicky, and second, I am too excited. Nicholas seemed exhilarated. After the Donahue's concoction started settling in Nicholas's body, they tested it out to see if it really worked. They even tried the classical ghost picking up book thing And behold, it worked. Almost as if Nicholas were alive. After that, Nicholas was extremely giddy and excited to get his plan in motion. After what seemed like half an hour, I finally thought we had enough of the playing, and now we had to get the work done. Nicholas had passed through and walked into his daughter, Stella's apartment. It had the same layout of which the Donahue's flat was, but theirs was more on the old side, whereas Stella's place was more modern and high-tech. Danny just had Nicholas go into the apartment and find the key to the front door and slide it over to Danny. Yes, the floor cracks were quite large. Don't worry, she comes back in an hour, so that gives us an hour to play golf, Nicholas said with a smirk, grabbing a baseball bat and ruining all the expensive furniture and decor in the house. I don't mind. I think that this should be all yours. You deserve this, Danny said with a dramatic bow, pretending Nicholas was royalty. He practically was. He was a billionaire. Why, thank you, Nicholas said with amusement. After an hour of playing golf, they had successfully destroyed everything. Then the door opened, and you could hear screaming. But in my opinion, it sounded like a cat being hit by a car. Oh my God! Oh my go! Not that painting! Not that painting! That cost too much to end up like this, said Stella, running around, looking through her apartment. Nicola watched with enjoyment as his daughter was running around checking her possessions that she had bought with his money. After all, it was his money, so it was his stuff too. Hello, Stella. I hoped you learned a lesson about why you shouldn't kill people, especially not family. Nicholas boomed from standing beside the TV, and then she shattered the expensive screen. What are you doing? Who are you? I'm calling with the cops. Get out of my place, Stella yelled back, visibly frightened, trying to sink into a wall and grabbing a hold of a knife. My dear, you don't need to do that. I got a deal to make. Nicholas clearly enjoyed this. I mean, Stella is a murder, so this should be okay. What do you want? Stella stuttered, but tried keeping her head high. I want you to donate all the money you got from your father's will. Why is this your concern? Stella sneered back, still nervous. Don't you cut me off again, Nicholas shouted. The second thing you must do, or I will follow you and haunt you, even in your sleep. So don't you dare disobey me. The second thing you must do is that you and your brother, Jeremy, will have to go to the police station and tell them you committed the murder of Nicholas DeRosa. Understood me? Nicholas seethed out. Stella just grunted and walked out the door, slamming it shut before she left her apartment. Then, Nicholas walked out of the bathroom, where I was hiding behind a shower. I know it's not the best place, but still, you did good, Nicholas. Danny smiled at him, and Nicholas beamed out a smile so bright it would make the sun look like a little flame compared to Nicholas. Nicholas and Danny did the same stuff to Nicholas's son, Jeremy DeRosa. Nicholas and Danny had to repeat this routine for 2 weeks before Jeremy donated his part of the will and went to hand himself in to the police, which meant Stella only had little time left before Jeremy told the police what happened. After a week more of Nicholas's and Danny's torture, Stella couldn't take it anymore. She went to donate her money and hand herself in with a miserable face. She only handed herself in because Nicholas had haunted her so bad that she couldn't even close her eyes to sleep. And she looked and acted like a zombie. After 8 months, I guess that's it, Danny said to Nicholas, who was about to go to the life after death. I guess it is, little buddy. Thanks again. I never thought Jeremy and Stella would be put into prison, but I guess they get their karma. Nicholas thanked Danny. Jeremy and Stella had a trial, and this time, Nichols made sure they didn't just pay the money and not get charged with anything. After 8 months of watching court fights happen, both of the DeRosa kids, well, they aren't really kids, got sent to prison. Goodbye, Danny. Thank you so much. Hope you have a happy ending to your life, Nichols said as he vanished away into thin air, into the afterlife. You may think the story ends here, but you're very wrong. The DeRosa kids had mysteriously died in prison, and they realized that Danny was helping their father scare them. So now the DeRosa kids were after me. And I am now basically a runaway. That I am even on national television. So proud of myself. Stella and Jeremy are coming to kill me for messing up their lives. And I am so going to end up dead meat. Muddled murder. The first thing I saw when I woke up was the blood. My mind went into a full panic mode, and I flipped out. I started checking all over myself to see where I had been injured, my bloody hands smearing the blood all over my clothes. Then I realized I wasn't injured, which could only mean one thing. It was someone else's blood, but whose? I had no idea. In fact, I had no idea where I was. All I could see around me was a dark, narrow street. I was standing on the sidewalk, quite far away from the nearest streetlight. Above me was the clear night sky. A handful of stars shone down upon me, and I felt that they were supposed to give me some comfort, but my heart rate refused to slow down. And then I saw it. There was a body on the curb, barely 10 meters away from me. My natural instinct was to go and check on the person, but something stopped me. I wondered what, but my memory refused to provide me with anything in my past. I tiptoed closer. Not another soul in the alley as I went and checked. I was still a couple of meters away from the man when I realized he wasn't breathing. There was a pool of blood spreading from his torso and onto the sidewalk. The man was dead, and I had blood on my hands. I didn't need any memory to add up the two. A car's headlights suddenly flashed to life in front of me, and the engine revved on. It reversed a bit, and then sped past me, barely giving me enough time to register the man sitting inside. From the small pharmacy in front of me, a short, bearded man came out and started pulling down the shutter. I did the first thing that came to my mind. I ran. I had no idea how long I had run for, but I am sure it was a pretty long time because my t-shirt was completely soaked in sweat by the time I stopped. And it was an early winter evening. I realized I was on a bridge, a few cars going by, couples walking holding hands, families with little children. I wondered who my parents were, if I was married or had a romantic lover. If I only had my memories back, my life. But the sight of my hand snapped me right out of those thoughts. It didn't matter, because nobody would want to be related to a murderer. I didn't know if someone else had killed him, or if it had been me. But suddenly, it occurred to me that it would be better if I didn't know. If I did remember my past, what if I realized that I had murdered him? Not only him, but maybe others too. Just that thought made me doubt myself, and wanting my memories back seemed like a dangerous option. I descended the bridge to reach the turbid river flowing past me, and thankfully washed up my bright red hands in the water. My hands were numb by the time I stood up to return to the upper roads. That was when I heard something. "Oh, it was easy as cake," a man said. "Are you sure no one was there?" asked a woman. "I think I saw a girl, and she saw me." I panicked and drove forward, but the car hit her head, and she collapsed to the ground. I didn't know what to do, and I stopped to check, but she was stirring up, so I raced away, the man replied. It was coming from the other side of the bridge, beyond the wall separating the riverbank for the construction of the bridge. I tiptoed over to it and peeked out to see who was talking. Smoke blew out from a man's dark lips as he put a cigarette into his mouth again, leaning on the wall. The woman was standing across from him, arms crossed, in oversized, baggy clothes. She had a beanie on her head and wore huge, funky glasses. She was facing me, but I was well hidden in the dark. They continued talking, not caring to keep their voices down. "You dolt? The body is still there?" the woman asked. "Abandoned on the sidewalk. Shouldn't be noticed by anyone till tomorrow morning. By then, we'll be long gone." The man was nonchalant. The woman nodded, a bit anxious, while he smoked for a minute more. Then they both started climbing up the riverbank. I followed them after some time, composing my thoughts and struggling to remember something. I thought I must have waited for a minute or two, but I somehow still saw the car leaving with the two people in it, and the slate of my memory, which had been wiped clean, managed to store the number in it. Police sirens made their way to my ears, and I was a bit surprised. My blank mind recognized it. Had I heard them many times before? Was I actually a criminal? What was my past? I somehow didn't want to find out. I just stood frozen there, above the riverbank, in the headlights of the police cars as they advanced towards me. I was literally unable to move, dead tired and fatigued. "Hands up in the air," came a voice over the loudspeaker. My addled mind did as I was told. The next few minutes were a blur as the cops came out, handcuffed me, charged me for the murder of a famous entrepreneur, and took me to the police station for questioning. Somewhere along the way, I fell unconscious. "Did you kill Mr. Pop?" I knew that was the name the entrepreneur was known by, but it sounded funny. I bit back a chuckle. "I don't know," I answered, just like I had the 3 last times. "I have all night," the officer told me. "Keep sitting then. I hope your butt doesn't hurt." I almost smirked. He glared daggers at me, and then stood up and left the room. A few minutes later, another officer entered, a plump, middle-aged woman. "Answer honestly. Did you kill Mr. Pop?" "I have been telling you honestly. I have no idea whether I did or I didn't. I just woke up with no memory of where I was or who I was." I yelled at her. Yelled. She nodded in sympathy. Quite common in criminals. I was too tired to correct her, but I was exasperated. Why couldn't they just understand I was telling the truth? Nothing in my head tells me that I killed that man, so I don't know, I declared. "There is quite some evidence, you know. The blood on your clothes matches with his." I looked down at the red spots and smears on my clothes and winced. And a shop owner in the alley says that he saw a girl with a description like yours run away from the dead body. Same orange t-shirt, same long braid, and same camo pants. Now tell me, what am I supposed to believe? She raised an eyebrow. "I really don't know," I said. The description was me all right, and I had run away. But had I killed the man? Unsure guilt surged through my veins, and the officer noticed the beads of sweat on my forehead. If I was the murderer, I was just making their jobs harder. But then, I didn't want to find out. Unsure guilt was stressful enough, and I didn't know how I could live with the knowledge that I had killed a human being in cold blood. "Are you sure you don't want to confess anything?" she asked with a tone of finality in her sweet voice. "I would confess if I remembered anything," I replied. Then I suddenly remembered something. "Wait, what's wrong?" The lady officer leaned forward, eyebrows knitted together. "I saw that car leave the bridge tonight. The 2 people in it, they were talking about something suspicious," I said, racking my brain for the words. The man raised an eyebrow. "What? I'm not sure." "They were saying that They left a body on the sidewalk. A girl had seen it. They hit her head and run away. They were planning to escape tonight. I narrated the incident. How does that make a difference? It does, I said, as I saw my spark of hope being snatched away with it. You should check. I remember the car number. You know the number plate, huh? The two police officers had tracked the number plate to a road by the river, where a car had been abandoned. Go home, the woman told me. I don't know where I live. Then wait here. We're going alone. I scowled as I followed them out of the police station, and their car revved away. Then I saw a cab passing me and jumped in. Follow that car! We followed the car for 25 minutes until we reached a road running parallel to the river. The police car had stopped behind the car I had seen before, and I told the cab driver to park behind it and jumped off. I rushed to the shore, where I could see the river and a small boathouse in the distance. The river was wide at that point, the current slow. To my left were the mountains into which the river bent, and my right were the police officers near the boathouse about half a kilometer away. I saw the man and woman I had seen earlier, along with a dark guy in shoes, pull out a rusty old motorboat and push it into the water and jump on. Put your hands in the air. You cannot escape tonight. The officers pointed their gun at them. In their surprise, someone suddenly activated the turbines, and they sped ahead into the river, moving towards my side. The motorboat was slow. The turbines were sputtering and malfunctioning as the boat raced away, forearm the routing and chasing officers. I don't know what I was thinking, but I barely hesitated a second before jumping into the river to my left. They were speeding towards my side, cutting through the middle of the river. I was perpendicularly closer, and I knew I could reach the center before they did. I swam in smooth, rapid strokes, cutting through the water like a literal fish as I aimed towards the center where they would reach in about 10 seconds. I think they were too preoccupied keeping their eyes on the officers, because they certainly didn't see me coming. The cold water didn't faze me. It was like it was part of my blood. Of course, the adrenaline counteracted it, and I had no trouble speeding through the limpid surface. As expected, I reached 1 second before their boat. As it zoomed past me, I somehow managed to grab hold of the end. I clambered on, somehow still unnoticed by the 3 people, while the officers stared at me, flabbergasted. They were too scared to shoot, let it hurt me, so it all depended on me. I crept forward and elbowed the cigarette man in the neck sharply, that he fell to the ground immediately, somehow unconscious. The woman turned to me, ready to battle in her large hanging clothes. I ducked to avoid her punch, grabbed her arm, and twisted it behind her back. Then I kicked her off the boat as it continued speeding away. The last man was the one with the shades, driving the boat. He stepped out of the seat while the boat continued towards the hills and turned to face me. Even though I couldn't see his eyes, a chill ran down my spine, and he attacked. I think my brain was a little slow to process as his kick swept me off my feet and knocked the air out of my lungs. Panting, I pushed at the floor to get up, while he grabbed my hair and pushed my head towards the whirring motors of the boat. He pressurized me into the blades while I used all my physical strength to hold my head up. He pushed once, twice, and the third time, I finally got a grip with one hand to ram the other into his sternum. As he doubled back, I realized that the boat was heading straight for a wall of soil and bushes. A hill was straight ahead. I rushed towards the wheel, but before I could rush it, the man got up and tugged me back. I wrestled with him, watching the imminent crash drifting closer. He kicked my thigh, and I launched a punch at his shoulder, ran again for the wheel. Grabbing the cool metal, I yanked it to the right, just as the boat curved around the edge of the hill, and barely avoided the collision. The man with shades had managed to stand up at the end of the boat, but my sudden turn threw him off balance, and he splashed into the water. I steered the boat towards the shore as I saw the other two criminals climbing out and being ambushed by the police officers. I finally parked along the bank and stepped out, my mind in a whirl, even more muddled than before. The two officers emerged, dragging along the two criminals. The woman went on to the boat and brought the third guy, then came back, and both of them patted my back. But I wasn't paying attention. My mind was elsewhere. How did I know how to do all that? How did I swim so well, or fight so brutally? The worst thought crept into my head. I could be a trained assassin or mercenary. I was too much of an expert, and I had been pretty close to the dead man. I was scared that I had led the police on a wild goose chase. I must be the real criminal. I must have killed Mr. Pop. I didn't want to find out. When I voiced my concerns, the police officers waved them away, too busy congratulating me. But my head refused to believe them, fearful of what my past could hold. Hey, do you remember me? A man rushed into the hospital ward, worry lines creasing over his forehead. Two people who claimed to be my parents were standing on one side of my bed, explaining to me that he was my brother. I'm sorry, but no, I said, and he looked like he was about to burst into tears. My parents leaned over and hugged him as they also squeezed my hands. I saw the two police officers appear from the door. They had huge grins on their faces. All three of them confessed to the murder, and we also found them guilty of a couple more. They have been duly imprisoned. Great work, kid, the man said. And on top of that, it was announced a couple of hours ago that you are going to be awarded a bravery medal for your courage." The woman was about to jump up and down. I found it difficult to smile. But how was I able to defeat them so easily? How could I fight so well, swim so smoothly? Are you sure I'm not a danger to society? My brow was furrowed. No, not at all. The man who was supposed to be my father guffawed and slapped my thigh. "Don't worry. I'll tell you a bit about yourself. You are 26, won 7 medals for swimming in high school, and now teach martial arts at a renowned academy."